Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Morris from Arapahoe Community College. He has 38 years experience in law enforcement. Really looking forward to this conversation. So welcome, Chief Morris. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Paige. Thanks for having me.
Of
I'm looking
course.
forward to this.
No, I am too. 38 years. That is a
Yeah,
long
give or
time to
take.
be. That's a long time. How did you get started in law enforcement? What was that kind of initial drive for you? And maybe give us some highlights over the last 38 years.
I think for me, the work interested me in my younger years, probably in high school, looking at different career paths, and it changed up over the years what I wanted to do. But I got in really young, and once I got into working and got into the law enforcement academy, years back. Um, the interest grew, of course. I think the first year, to me anyway, was make it or break it. I got on, and it was still the '80s when I got on. And it was a different cultural mindset. It was a different environment back then. Um, you learned a lot of old school techniques. You worked and you adapted as you saw what worked for you as well. So I think the first year I had almost second thoughts, like a lot of people do in the career. You're working a lot of nights and you're working different shifts and things like that. And then once you get kind of shake out that first year, and you just kind of like any career, really, you're in for the long haul at some point. And I think there's decisions you make. Once you're in a year, 2, 3, 5, 10 years, are you going to stay? And I stuck with it and went into the leadership parts of it as well. So
Did you have any strategies or anything that helped you to kind of push past those maybe burnout years where you had those questions of like, do I keep going or not? Was there anything that you can kind of recall that helped you to keep going?
I think a lot was talking to mentors
Mm,
is important. Having some people that were in not even leadership roles necessarily, but people who were they had that kind of leadership mentality and were a good resource to talk to and say, I'm kind of going through this or that, and they could give you positive reinforcement to why you're working within the career and that kind of thing. Outlets, um, whether that be family, don't lose track of the important things, and sometimes we do. You
mm,
kind of disconnect from family because you're in a dynamic career. It's different. It's
mhm.
not like going to most office environments or production work and things like that. It's a dynamic career that kind of really pulls you in, and you experience a lot, and it can be rewarding and it can be challenging at the same time. So you need some outlets. You need to um, connect with things that your physical fitness for me was one. Working out, getting out, either for bike riding and things like that, getting into the gym, the weight training, and skiing later became a real passion for me to kind of to just get out into the environment, and it really is a way to disconnect. Um, well, especially on weekdays when it's not crowded, but that's kind of the way that all works because people find the same outlets you do. But I think that was key is to. It was always hard for me to walk out the door, especially in a leadership role, and disconnect completely from the department because you're always needed for something or another. So
Yeah.
uh, having that downtime is important. Um,
When you say mentors, because I agree with you, early in my career, there were some people who were really instrumental in my growth and development and advancement in my career, and people who I really looked up to and I leaned on. And I think what you said, I really liked that mentors can come in all kinds of shapes and forms, and I don't think that someone has to have like a formal leadership role or position or a certain specific title to be a mentor for you. But what I always tried to do was look around and see, who I thought was doing what I wanted or who had achieved something that I wanted to achieve and really try to, figure out how they did that and, try to like soak in all the knowledge that they had and that they were willing to provide. Do you think that there was anything that your mentors taught you that you have since passed on to other people?
Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes you find the mentor in the same field, but in a different department or agency, or
Mhm.
maybe even in a different public safety part of a career that is something that really works for you. The important thing to me is to sift through what's important and what's not. So that
Mm.
people give you a positive reinforcement, or you don't generally choose a mentor that has a negative outlook on what's going on in not only their career but the career path that you might have. You need to sift through what is good information, what's bad. When you are 20 and maybe a little older, that's not always easy to do, but it does come with time. When you're kind of you're just a kid entering this job in reality. So it's important to factor in what's the important things, what's good, what's bad, and uh, people will usually approach you
Mm.
that hey, it looks to me like you're having a tough time. You're going through your training period, whatever. They're kind of rough on you. And our field training years ago, to me, it was more like a boot camp in a way, but it was there to toughen you up. I think we look at it differently now.
Yeah.
So I think that's key, is to find the right set of folks that work for you, um, and stay away from the traps that come along the way, because it does. So
Yeah. Well, and I've always really kind of lived by this, and I didn't really have a close relationship with my mom, but there was one lesson that she taught me when I was younger that I think kind of stuck with me. But she told me, you are the people who you surround yourself with. And at the time, I didn't really know how important that was. I was like, oh, whatever, mom, I was a
yeah,
teenager, like not going to listen to you. And as I got older, I really started to understand the importance of that. And there's this saying that if you are the sum of I think it's the five closest people to you. And so to choose wisely. And I think to your point, you know, being selective of the people who you surround yourself with, because they can be really positive influences on you and they can help to uplift you and, help in your advancement, whether that's in your career or in your life. And then the reverse is also true. You could hang around with people who are going to drag you down or pull you down or be bad influences. And the one thing that I really tried to do, because I've had moments where I've had to kind of like cut people out of my life a little bit, and be like, oh, this person's not really positive. And best case scenarios, if people do approach you and that they're, positive influences and they're able to come and, be that source of mentorship for you. But also, I think a message for people who are listening to this is don't be afraid to reach out to people who you aspire to be as well. Don't be afraid to be proactive in stepping forward and asking someone, hey, would you mentor me? I really like value you and your career or your perspectives or your knowledge and education. Would you be willing to mentor me? And I wouldn't say everyone will say yes, but I think that if you strive to surround yourself with the best people possible, that's only gonna, push you forward in life.
and don't be afraid to set the boundaries early on
Yeah.
too. Recognize whether you're connected with the right people, and if not, you kind of in a way just say, it's just, you know you leave a conversation knowing what you're going to take from it or not. I
Yeah.
think is what you're going to utilize in the future. It's the best way to look at it. So
Yeah, and that actually really speaks volumes to me because, and I don't know if everyone can relate to this. I don't know if it's a male female thing, but that's been really hard for me, in my life to set those boundaries because I always felt like I didn't want to ruffle feathers. I didn't want to step on anyone's toes. Like I wanted to be easy to work with or agreeable. And so, in my early life, and it's something that I've had to work on, is, finding that balance where you can have boundaries and still be easy to work with and, still be someone that people respect. It's not an either or. And I think sometimes, especially with women that I speak to, it feels that way that we have to like kind of take a step back a little bit. And I've learned that actually, the more boundaries I have in a respectful way, I mean, you have to be tactful about how you approach everything.
Right.
I actually think the more like respect I get, I think that people value that in other people that like can um, kind of know, where they're at and be able to communicate that in a way that like sets that boundary. And I think that people respond really well to that. But I've had to learn that over time. It didn't happen organically.
Yeah, I feel the same way. When you're young, I just don't want to. I want to make my year probation. You know,
Mhm.
at that, if you've got a year probation, whatever, and go through your training. I don't want to, get a negative response to things, but I also need to be a little bit a campaign for my own well-being as well. And I think that's what I think the generations after me and my time have learned that more in a way,
Mhm.
to kind of um, work towards what is important to them and the different generations that come up. So we
Yeah.
adapt to that. It's the I think the biggest difficult transition for me was the first rank sergeant is now you come from within and learning to now have to be sort of not just the coaching part's important. Um, you could see what my work product is, what I expect, the expectations, excuse me. And you've seen me work and I go out and do the job. So that's one thing. But now to be sort of that, not just a coach and someone they can mentor, but it's maybe at times the disciplinarian or the
Yeah.
person that does have to say no, or this is the way we're going to go with something, but also wise enough to take the advice of the people who work for your team. So
Mm.
that to me was the probably the biggest jump in a change up because I promoted pretty young and you're not for me anyway. Some people go in fully confident or act like it, and some people go in and like I just don't want to. I want to make sure I try to do the right thing and meet the expectations. So
It's a really interesting point that you make. I can imagine how challenging that would be to one, want to have an open mind and, make people feel like you are hearing them and you value, what they have to say and who they are as people. But on the other end, you also have to like set those boundaries and like you said that the disciplinary side of things, but then like you also want to be liked but then you can't always be liked by everybody. You know what I
yeah,
mean? And so I would imagine that that is super challenging and that there's a lot of dynamics to that, walking into a new role where you're like, I want people to like me, but also respect me, but also I want them to feel valued, but also I have this job and I have this hat and
yeah.
trying to juggle everything in the best way possible.
I kind of measured it for myself with people that would say or want to work for me again.
Mm,
You know, in another assignment or another department or something. I kind of spoke volumes and the feedback was positive and kind of surprised me at times because sometimes you don't know what people's opinions are until later. But again, like you say, it's not a popularity contest.
yeah.
Firm and fair might be a good way to put it. As one of my early
Yeah.
supervisors put it, you're going to be firm and fair across the board. You're not going to just pick and choose. So
That's a great
that's
way to
kind of
put
one of
it.
those. Yeah, that's kind of the way you do that, and you kind of do it with the public the same way. So,
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. I really like that you said that it speaks volumes if people want to work with you again. Um, I always like I find that in my space too. Like, when you hear someone who's like, yeah, like I spoke with someone else and they had good things to say about you, you're
yeah.
like, whoa, that feels so good. Like, what are people saying when you're not in the room? What are people saying like behind closed doors? Are they saying positive things or negative things? And what are those things that they're saying? Is it speaking
Hmm.
character, your work ethic? Like what is that? And so um I think that's a really good point. And you don't always get that feedback, right? You don't always know where people stand.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
one of the things that and this is, obviously a little bit of a different situation, but I've done like presentations before, and this is not speaking to character or anything to do with me because they don't know me. Like it's, an hour presentation, but there's nothing more humbling than getting anonymous, candid feedback from people,
Yeah.
and hearing what people are saying in confidentiality about, you and what you have going on. Because I think that's when people are the most honest. So if people are willing to work with you and they're saying good things behind your back, then that's best case scenario, in my opinion.
Yeah. And it's never 100%, but it's
Never, yeah.
better than the average. But you stand by what your philosophy is. Um,
Yeah. One of the things that you had mentioned is, kind of the pressure of rising through the ranks and, having more and more pressure at the top. And one of the conversations that I've had recently is this idea of how do you provide resources for leadership? Because, it's that saying of it's lonely at the top, right? There's a lot of pressure, but it's also more lonely at the top in the sense of, maybe not being able to communicate with people or offload some of the things that you're going through, whether that's administrative stress or personal stress or whatever that is. And so, um, I know that you talked a little bit about this, but one of the things you told me was like really disconnecting, really having time off. But what other advice would you have for other leaders in the sense of being more proactive about your own wellness as a leader? Because, you have to take care of yourselves too. You can't just take care of everybody else and neglect yourself.
yeah, I think that the most difficult is we've gone through that in our state in Colorado is we had a resource group in the last I would say somewhere around the time of post pandemic, let's say, as a resource for chiefs to air out some challenges they were experiencing. And I remember making a comment, well, I wish this was around now 15 years ago or so when I became a chief, because you really do feel isolated in a lot of ways. For me, coming in as an external in my first chief's position, I did inherit a really good team that just was looking for direction. They
Mm,
wanted leadership, they wanted direction. They did not want to be a political whim and that kind of thing, and that was important to them, and it should be. Um, so when you're at the top, there's very few people that maybe you feel comfortable with confiding in,
sure.
other than maybe close friends and family members and that sort of thing. It's good to have that outlet. So I think that once you get to those positions, whether it be chief, sheriff, whatever, it's different. It's kind of the pressure thing, but you, for me, develop early just a way of like kind of you can't totally disconnect because the responsibility is always there. You
Yeah.
know, um, we are at a very large community college. We've got a large population at times throughout the year. Um, there are times during breaks the enrollment and population is lower. So those are kind of our breaks in our way for regrouping and training and things like that. And they're welcome breaks for that kind of thing. You don't always get that in cities, obviously. So having the external interests that we brought up before is important, and having mental health type coaching and things like that. We brought in professionals for that. We do work with our human resources department. We signed on with an external provider for an app that does that. We came to the realization that if there's going to be a crisis, it's generally not going to be 9 to 5
Mm, hmm.
or anywhere near the evening. It's probably going to be something off hours. So we wanted to give that resource to our staff members and team that they have this resource to contact and do that, of course, anonymously. It depends on the individual too. How much can you detach yourself from it? A lot of people are really good at it. I never was. In that sense that you're always thinking, well, I just finished up a certain case. Did I remember to do, X, Y, and Z. A lot of people can open the door and leave for the day and generally not think about it. So, and that's just personality, I think. So you have to balance it. Is probably the key. How much am I going to dwell on this? Let me try to work on it when I come back on duty. So that's always been the challenge for a lot of people, and for me. So
Yeah.
the outlets are important. What do you do when you're off? Like, how about some travel? We were talking about that a while back. You get away. Um, and the key to me, the advice probably, if you look for that, don't take the problem with you on vacation
Mm.
because it will manifest itself in your personality. The people read you. Your family reads you like a book. So
Yeah.
that's a key is to try to, we're not always successful because if we care a great deal about our careers. It's on our mind. So
Yeah. I can really relate to that. And obviously, I'm in a different career than you are, but there's that relatability of, and I think they always say like older, wiser,
yeah,
like um,
yeah,
my hope is that there are some younger people who listen to this podcast that can learn from, people who have been through, some of the similar things and they can maybe learn to not do some of the things that we've done. But um, when I was younger in my career, I everything was my career, everything. There was no disconnect. And I thought that if I let it go, if I loosened the reins even a little bit, that someone was going to pass me by. It was almost like this obsession to be the best and be all in. And I recognize now how much I sacrificed in my personal life because of that. But also, I don't know. I think it was honestly in my head. I don't know if I would have had that balance if things would have been different. Because if you have a strong work ethic and you care about what you're doing, you're going to be all in anyway when you're at
yeah,
work, right? Like, you don't have to be all in at work when you're not at work. But in my head, I was like, it's all or nothing, and I lost a lot of friends and family and things that made me feel like me in the process. And who knows, hindsight's 2020, who knows what would have happened. But I kind of now have this perspective of, I think that I probably would have achieved the same things. And honestly, maybe I would have achieved more because I would have had more gas in the tank to
mhm,
give, because I had those times to disconnect instead of just operating on full burnout mode and thinking that if you just kept sprinting, that it was going to, eventually get you to some end goal. And really, I was just running on E the whole time. And I really agree with you. I think that it's hard. It's hard to disconnect. There may be moments where you can't fully, but especially if you're going to be like on vacation and
yeah,
everything's good, like let it be, like give yourself a few moments to like exhale,
yeah,
like, enjoy the moment. Because the one thing I've learned is that you don't get those moments back.
yeah,
And
true.
anyone
Yeah,
who's listening to this now, doesn't matter how old you are the youngest right now that you will ever be. And, trying to take advantage of this time right now because, tomorrow is never guaranteed and we never know what's going to happen in life. And I think that that's one of my regrets is that I wasn't able to, let go of some of that control. Like I felt like I just needed,
yeah.
to be 100% all the time.
And I was fortunate and that I had close friends from where I grew up and from up to high school and wherever, and we stayed in touch for years. So I think they understood what my career was like. They were, a good resource for me. And I think one of the things that I didn't mention is it's good to have an alternate balance in the sense that don't always surround yourself with everyone in the same career.
Mm.
Have those friends that are external to what we go through, and it's a nice balance because you get an appreciation for certain things. And you do hear perspectives from people that aren't in law enforcement and public safety. You do hear a different perspective, and that actually is part of the disconnect is when you have a group of friends that maybe they're into sports, they're into music, they're into fitness, and you just get off into that direction for a little bit and
Yeah.
get away from what you're doing. So, um, if you'd asked me years ago, would I make 30 years? I didn't know my first year was going to be 1 to 5 years, you know, but I think it was just the right fit for me and the team that I had, people that helped me along the way and put me on course when I might not have been on course. So,
Yeah. I appreciate you saying, having different perspectives in your life, and having people who ground you. And one of the things that I did was I surrounded myself with people who were not going to call me out. And I think I didn't maybe consciously know that I was doing that, but I think later in life I figured it out that like when I was in my earlier, years, I was surrounding myself with people who did the same things that I did. And at that time I wasn't making the best decisions. I was, a teenager and or young
right.
adult who maybe wasn't making the best decisions, and it was by design that I did that because I didn't want people to call me out, and I didn't want different perspectives because that meant that someone would take that magnifying glass to me and kind of call me out on the things I was doing. And now I really encourage that in my life. I really like that. I like having people from different walks of life, different perspectives. It's refreshing to have a conversation with someone that's not about work. And it doesn't matter what career you're in, it is so nice sometimes to just laugh about something or hear someone else's like life story or like hear something that they have going on, because we do get so like inundated with the things that we're doing that we sometimes forget that there's a whole nother world out there. There's other
Yeah.
things. And so I really like that you said that because for me, it's something I look forward to in, friends who have a completely different career. They have different interests, and it's just really fun to surround yourself with people. Also, like to kind of understand different ways of thinking, and different ways of teaching. Because again, like we only have our perspective.
Yeah.
And if someone calls you out and they're like, hey, this is my perspective, and you can have that conversation of like, wait, like why do you think that way, or how did you get there, and
Yeah.
really dissecting that a little bit and understanding, I think, is a way for you to grow as a individual, as well. One of the things that you had told me is that you have this approach as a leader that's that of a coach. And I wanted to hear like what that is in action. Like how do you coach your people?
Well, in action, a lot of um, when you interview for positions of leadership, a lot of people, that's kind of the tagline, coaching and mentoring. So coaching is you interact with the people that and no better uh, opportunity for that probably than when you're at a supervisor level of sergeant or something like that, and you're involved in working on the street with your folks, is to correct when it's time to correct, to show the right way to do something, to get a perspective or get some back feedback from why people did things a certain way. Maybe they have another approach that you haven't considered that's actually working better. So coaching links into being approachable.
Yeah.
If you're going to be the kind of supervisor or leader that is not approached, then you're not going to get the feedback. People are going to be more concerned about um, staying out of trouble or impressing you than they are of being able to approach you and ask for the guidance that they might need and an opinion. So it's kind of an exchange coaching, and I've done it in the sport world too. You go out and when you're coaching a sport, um, you are educating, and that's what we're doing here too. We're educating the people that work for us, and we're actually educating the public,
Mm.
like kind of to touch back what we are talking about before when we interact with people that aren't in this profession. They have questions. Why do people do a certain thing? And then you can kind of fill them in on why that happens. And maybe no one took the time to do that.
Yeah.
for them. You give them that interaction. It really does move itself towards positive relations later because people have an understanding about it. We all have different personalities in this job can be that way. And sometimes there are time constraints when you can't take the time to do that. But in coaching, I've always made a mental note to get back to someone on something, not just leave it open ended because I had a concern about something. Um, Sometimes it's taken positively and sometimes not. Maybe there's just a safety issue that you learned through your career, um, where maybe you made a mistake or you got hurt or injured or watched someone else go through the same thing and you're trying to prevent that for another part of your team. So it's an educational part of it and it's feedback both ways. So
Yeah. I like that you said being approachable, and you also talked about having an open mind. And I think that one of the things, okay, so I'm gonna kind of backtrack a little bit, but hopefully this makes sense. Um, have you seen the new Netflix documentary about the Dallas Cowboys? Have you seen this?
no, I saw the coming attractions for it, and
Okay.
it kind of interests me because I know you're talking about a lot of things on the competition to win, and the motivation of that. But I haven't seen it yet. But I know
Yeah.
what you're talking about.
So I won't go into depth about it, but they highlight two of the main coaches, and they both had completely different approaches, but they were both equally loved by these players for different reasons, one way or another. And of course, like not everyone did. There was maybe some like tension with like one or two players for, whichever coach, but I think the idea with coaching and mentorship, whether you are doing that within your organization or you're doing this in a sports team, is that these coaches truly wanted these players to win. Like, and not win the game necessarily, but to like win in life, win
Mhm.
in their career. And it was like this from a space of like true care and love, for these people and saying like, hey, like, I am here for you. I am here to try to create this space where you can be the best version of yourself.
Yeah,
And what do we need to do to get there? And everyone has different learning styles, right? Everyone's motivated by different things and trying to determine, like, okay, how can we get the best version of this player? And that might look different from getting the best version of this player. Like the approaches are going to be different. And so
yeah,
I heard that in what you were saying of like being approachable, having an open mind, and really wanting people to succeed in their
yeah.
career and in their life. How do you think leadership impacts wellness?
It is a direct impact. Um, Going back to the coaching analogy, there's an NFL coach I watched a little bit of a mini documentary, if you will, on. He was out of coaching for a short bit. He's back, but he reimagined himself, if that's what you'd call it, repositioned himself for a new career by actually going and meeting with different people in different sports, not just football, for instance.
Mm,
Taking the important success stories of people and how they went through what they did. So it's the same thing, for the leadership part of it. I literally will have to, maybe it's been a rough week and you walk out and you start thinking about, um, how are you now going to regroup and come back in for the next week or day or whatever. And you have to then put on, let's call it the game face. You have to come back in and not show the emotion. I can't say that I've not been 100% successful in non-emotion, but um, it's important to uh, steady the group, give that confidence that we're going to move forward with things. And a lot of that happens in times when you have transitions of leadership, maybe above you. There's a lot of uncertainty, so you really have to, weather that storm and show your team how that's going to work. So,
yeah.
and the approach is I have that open door. Everybody says, a lot of people say they have an open door policy. Mine is literally open. It's never closed. It's not closed at night when I leave this office. There's nothing out here. There's no secrets. It's a work area. My door remains open for people to come in if they have to see me. And the concept is, um, the door is open. You could peek in and see my office. It's like that kind of thing. It's not
Yeah.
any, not anything, you know, that they can't imagine. I will say it is closed now for the meeting, but because we'd get too much noise in here. But it's an open door thing. It's a philosophy I passed anywhere, as especially as a chief, that the door remains open. That people
Yeah.
don't get that feeling like we're not being transparent or something like that. If there's something that's that important and sensitive, it's not laying around. But
Yeah.
that's the open door thing, that you can come in, and I do. When that's working is when more than half your organization will stop in to see
Yeah.
you. And in we're not really big department, and that's pretty much our entire organization. The team members will stop in. So, and
Yeah.
they want to see you. In a lot of ways, they want to see you. If you're the secluded chief, with the door closed and doing your own thing, the image doesn't come out for that leadership perspective. So,
Yeah. I love that you said that, like, the proof that it's working and that you're approachable is that people are actually showing up and saying hi and peeking in and seeing how you're doing. And I agree with you. I think that that is um, an indication of success and building a culture of wellness. And, one of the things we talked about offline is, there's so many conversations about wellness, and there is a lot of effort. And it's come a long way in the last 8 years that I've been in this space. And I always, always, no matter what, think that there's always room for improvement. I think that if you don't think that there's room for improvement, then that's when you start to fall behind. But I have seen a lot of growth in the last 8 years, and having these conversations with individuals like yourself who have those perspectives and words of wisdom and, advice to give about taking time off and surrounding yourself with people outside of this career and making sure that you have mentors and people to talk to and building a culture within the organization that supports wellness. And at the time of this filming, it's September, which is Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. And we had talked about mental health and the fact that we're still seeing, suicide within this profession. And my question to you is, what do you think is still missing? Or, why do you think that maybe there's still a stigma around wellness? And what are your thoughts on, mental health and suicide prevention?
well, I guess the stigma is there, that, and that's why with the anonymous option kind of pulls that away from, because with our uh, the app that's used and the contact we have, we won't know.
Mhm.
It's confidential. So, um, when I first got into law enforcement, it was kind of like you got into some kind of altercation or whatever, you were injured, whatever. The expectation was you're going to not be out too long. You just get right back into the work. And it kind of works for some people, but not for others. We got to remember, um, uh, I came up with a different group of people that I probably wouldn't want that for the folks that come up in our ranks now. It's different. Now we have probably at least 3 or 4 different generational teams out there now. So I think I can speak to that. The mental health part is um, it's growing, it's adapting to the times. So it's not just stagnant. It doesn't just decide there's one way to approach something or not. So I think that's key. Our people are trained with the crisis intervention programs to deal with people as the public we interact with. And a lot of that they take for themselves as well. And then we have the other options available to them. And I'd say the thing that concerns me is those that won't take advantage. Do they build up a wall for whatever reason? Um, that's the concern, is people that won't take advantage of something that's really a great and valuable resource. So I
Yeah.
think that's where we see it in our military. We see a great deal of it, there, maybe more than anywhere, that we ask people to do very difficult things and then expect them to just come in and transition to public life. We're kind of the same way, and you and I touched about it before. Fire teams are the same way. You're going into some really critical, unusual situations, um, and then you have to go back into kind of like the normal way you operate, you know, after that. So at some point, it depends. I think a lot of it depends on where you are and your personality, and a lot depends on how much of it you're exposed to and how much you can adapt to. So, um, it makes us feel terrible if we do miss something, obviously, and someone has an issue later that and we, I see it. I've seen it, for instance, LinkedIn. I'll see a lot there.
Yeah.
These young officers that made a terrible decision, and it's very hard.
Yeah. I think one of the hard questions is like, how do you get people to take advantage of these things? How do you get people to prioritize themselves and take action when it comes to their wellness? And I don't think that anyone has the answer for that right now. There's a kind of a back and forth between, do we mandate it? Do we not mandate it? And there's opinions on both sides of it. Some people are, like, we should mandate this and make sure that everyone every year is checking in with a mental health clinician and everyone does it. And some people I talk to are like, we're not going to do that. We're not going to, mandate people to do it. And so there's opposing arguments on, how do you get people to do the things? And I don't know if there is like a set answer yet on, how to do that above and beyond like maybe mandating an annual visit with someone, as far as like ongoing long-term action. I don't think that anyone really quite has that figured out.
I think it starts with recognition, that if you see a problem, that you guide that person somewhere, or you give attention to it, that you don't just dismiss it.
Hmm.
I think that happens a lot with other issues as well. We have to be more interactive that way. Recognition of an issue is probably the first step. So I most you're seeing that more and more in law enforcement, and I've seen some of the other chiefs you've spoken with. Everyone recognizes, everyone has a way of addressing it, or at least making those initial um, connections to that. So it it takes time. Yeah.
Yeah. And I appreciate you kind of mentioning that, of like looking out for each other, maybe asking the hard questions, not being afraid to ask those questions, maybe recognizing some of the symptoms, if there are any, what that
Right.
looks like, if it's problems at home or, performance on the job or sick time or, maybe a change in personality or, attitude on the job, and being able to recognize some of those things and then being, comfortable to ask the questions and to, kind of steer someone in the direction of resources, if and when they need them. And I have talked to people who have said that there were no signs. And
Right.
so I think that's challenging too. So I appreciate, your perspective on that. My final question for you is for the younger generation. What words of wisdom would you share with someone who's earlier in their career? Maybe something that you wish you would have known earlier or something that's helped you along the way.
Give it time. Uh, you will not know everything right away. Remember that you bring positive aspects of yourself to a career, and be patient is really what it is. And seek out that mentor or trusted person you can talk to and get and kind of don't live the. I think for me it was just I've seen a lot of folks do that. And maybe I did in my early career. The job is kind of consuming in the sense that it's not your average job. You're sometimes you can't wait to get back into the adventure of it. So pace yourself is probably another good thing. Is learn from the day one when you're in the academy. Um, Pay attention to what you're learning, and then take that to the field and during your field training, and kind of check into the checks and balances of what the real life situation is, the real world in that career. But I think patience and the mutual respect for the others in the field, and don't lose touch with where you came from. You're part of the public as well. So, mutual respect is key. So I think it's a lot of that patience and pacing yourself in your career, because it can be a long one, as as I know now. Even the average 20-25 year plus career, and it does go quick. So believe me, you'll see just how fast I can move along. So when you get in this career, you're new at it. So take time for what's important, that kind of thing. So that's the important thing.
Thank you. Chief Morris, I really appreciate your time. Thank you for coming on here and talking to me about wellness. That is all I have for you, but if I missed anything and you want to, give any last words, I'll leave it up to you.
No, I think we've covered it.
Yeah.
I appreciate the work you're doing, Paige, and these are important to get out there. And that in this career, it's important. Public safety, first responders, it's a critical role, and um, recruiting that position has been tough. Getting people back in, and it depends where you are. Some are doing well with it. The other part's the retention part. So I think these things we do helps with that retention part. So,
Yeah. Well, thank
for a
you.
healthy career.
I appreciate that.
Thank you, Paige. Appreciate it.
Thank you.